All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for waiting. My name is Paul Hutchinson. I'm Assistant Director of Career Services. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Also to thank the Alumni Office and Philippa Moore for helping to co-sponsor the event tonight. Thank you for the excellent turnout. We're very happy with it. Our final panelist, Miriam, she's going to be here momentarily. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a couple of things about this evening. So really, I would like this to be, as much as we can, something to where you get lots of chances to ask questions. There will be not only questions you can ask during a Q&A, but also 2 questions you can ask individually or one-on-one with the panelists after we're done with the official portion of tonight. We are audio recording tonight's event, so if you do have a question that you're asking, just ask if you can try to speak as clearly and loudly as you can so it can get picked up on the microphone for the recording. What I'm going to do is actually start with asking each of our panelists if they could give a short overview of not only themselves but also to their organization, and also to answer the question of what advice would they give for anybody wanting to make a transition from, I call it backpack to briefcase. So going from school into work, and any what tips and things they would have. And then I have a few questions that I can certainly ask them, and then after that I will turn it over to the audience here to ask questions. So what I will do tonight is actually start with John to my left, or to my right, I'm sorry, and then kind of work on down, and then we'll come back when Marion comes in to have her perspective as well. So go ahead.
Thank you. I'm checking to see who I am for a second. I'm John O'Brien. I'm actually a pharmacist who became a pharmacist because my mom got sick, and I needed to really figure out really quickly how to help her understand how to use her medicines. I found myself in public health because she had trouble paying for her medicines. So I found myself working really closely with both the pharmaceutical industry and others to sort of better understand programs for people like her who didn't have access to affordable health insurance. From there, I actually found myself as a student here at the suggestion of a mentor, and I both studied as a capstone project state and federal interaction in the implementation of Medicare prescription drug coverage while I was working for pharma and the White House to actually implement Medicare prescription drug coverage via the Medicare Rx Education Network, and working with governors and state houses to actually write their Senior Pharmaceutical Assistance Program legislation, or the SPAP RAPs. So I had this huge interest in implementation, particularly through some mentoring here in the Department of Health Policy and Management. So once the Affordable Care Act passed in March, and I was working, as a professor and also doing some fellowships on the Hill, it was irresistible for me to go into CMS to actually implement the Act. If Dr. Berwick was here, and I'm a huge Don Berwick fan, even though I have to say that I'm here as myself and an alumni and not an official agent of CMS, but what Dr. Berwick is doing is fantastic, and he'd say that we basically wear 3 hats as CMS. We are, by and large, America's largest health insurer. We are a positive market force in improving health care across the public and private sector. And we are responsible for implementing about 269 of the provisions in the Affordable Care Act. So that's by and large what I do as a program coordinator. I am the neutral broker between the components, right, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the different components within that agency all have to meet with the Office of the Administrator, and I'm sort of their liaison. I like to tell my former students that I push paper, I put together binders, I stay late making copies, I make a lot of Adobe Acrobat files. The really cool thing is I hand those to the administrator and deputy principal administrator and sit behind him and her while they discuss the policy and actually implement what it is that we're doing. So with that, I would say that probably leads to one of my, I'll work backwards. One of the things that I would say as you make the transition from backpack to briefcase, and that's really leave your ego and your pedigree and your education at the door. You may have done some fantastic things here, and they may have really built us up about how important of a role we'll play in public health when we left here. But when you get to Baltimore or Washington or wherever it is that you're going to be working in the federal government, there's a strong chance that there's a lot of people that are just, they've been there and they've seen one administrator and they've seen another and they're going to wait them out, and they may not really be very interested in sort of you and your gung-ho, I'm protecting health, saving lives millions at a time attitude. Working backwards from there, I would say explain who you are in the interview and make it real clear when you do your application process and your hiring documents and your federal resume that they know just what a rock star you are and how qualified you are at the GS, whatever level you're coming in as, because if you don't make that clear, they can't hire you. And the person who wants to hire you won't even see you because some HR official won't qualify you for the position. But again, once you are hired and you show up on that first day, it's no longer about who you are. It's getting to know who everyone else is and who you're going to be working with, because there are people at CMS in Baltimore who have been there for 30-some years. And it wasn't until recently that they just started hiring new people. So these folks have seen everything. They are excellent teachers, excellent mentors, and the surest way to not learn from them is to tell them how much you know or how wrong they do things. And lastly, as you enter the hiring process, talk to everyone you know, especially your alumni network and people who may already be in these positions. The USA Jobs process is a process, and it's a federal process, which comes with benefits and risks and rights and responsibilities. But I'm amazed at the number of times someone at the director level will say, we're staffing up. Do you have any good suggestions for people? So odds are good. We all know people who are hiring. This is one of the biggest hirings I've seen in my brief time in Washington. And odds are good you know someone who can help you get that interview, get that job, and maybe even bypass a lot of the process. But if you don't ask, then they can't coach you on what that process looks like. So I probably already exceeded my 5 minutes, but thank you.
Okay. James?
Great. Hi, my name is J.R. Williams. I'm a epidemiologist at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the FDA. So I trained entirely at Hopkins, undergrad, master's, PhD. I had a background in neuroscience. My PhD is in psychiatric epidemiology. But really, while at Hopkins, I focused mostly on clinical research, applying sort of epi methods to clinical research. So I designed some clinical trials and focused on some natural history studies in neurology and psychiatry. I transitioned to the FDA honestly by accident. I was looking for a job, and I met someone at a wedding who I would later call her to ask her what this job announcement the FDA actually detailed, because it was very ambiguous. 3 sort of resume passes later, I landed in my office, which is the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology. And what we do is our primary focus is on understanding post-market drug safety issues. Really what my office is probably best known for is Vioxx. We were the office that really called for Vioxx to come off the market. And our office is very used to testifying before Congress. So what we do on a day-to-day level is we help our colleagues in the Office of New Drugs understand the adverse events, the risk of adverse events in different populations. For example, if a heart drug is causing death or is associated with death, obviously that could be because it's treating an at-risk population. So we have to put the event rate in context of the population. So we help do studies to put that event rate in context, but we also, through internal resources and through extramural resources, such as using CMS data now or data with the VA, or through some private contracts who have access to commercial databases, we perform epi studies to ask what is the long-term risk of certain exposures with certain outcomes. So I really, wear multiple hats in my job. I serve as a PI on 5 studies right now. I serve as a consultant to other divisions, and I also serve as a regulator, reviewing submissions from pharmaceutical companies and judging whether it meets sort of regulatory requirements and how, and if it doesn't, how best they can revise it so it meets our needs. So it's a very interesting job, and I get to do a lot of very interesting things. And my job what I do changes, weekly. We have deadlines that must be met because we're funded both via taxpayer dollars and through industry dollars. So with those industry dollars comes deadlines. So, there's some very fast turnarounds, and also because something might be a public health issue, we obviously want to act sooner rather than later. So it's very fast-paced, very scientific, but it's a very applied and very impactful job. Probably my advice from going back to Briefcase actually is a little bit different. So my division is a very young division, and we're very new. And because of that, I'm in a situation where, I am the new kid on the block, but, I can be very, take risks and go out there and, be very forthcoming and challenge the existing, processes and the existing, ways we do things, because we haven't been doing them for long. And for a lot of things we're doing, we don't know the best way yet. So we really are developing best practices in really in pharmacoepidemiology. So it's actually a very young field, and we are sort of by default one of the leaders of the field. So it's actually very exciting. So my sort of advice is, know your limitations, but don't be afraid to reach, to do things that are slightly outside your capacities, to really reach and try to do things that are going to make you grow, and that you might fail at. Obviously, be prepared to ask for help and be prepared to acknowledge your limitations. But I think especially on some of your first assignments, really go for those challenging assignments, because it's cliche, but first impressions do matter. So, if you quickly show someone who takes initiative and who is able to, have a great work product in a very short amount of time, things will start really snowballing really fast, at least in my experiences, and you will get, access to even, greater projects of greater scope, and greater impact. Now, granted, I do a lot of very sort of high impact, high profile issues, but I also do photocopying, and I also, schedule meetings, and I also run around trying to, ask for, do things for my director, such as schedule his meetings or photocopying briefing packages for him. So, I think a lot of people sometimes think when you go out in the workforce, especially when you have a graduate degree, those tasks are behind you. It really is sort of juggling and, and realizing that you really are going to be wearing all hats. You're going to be an expert sometimes, but you're also going to be a secretary sometimes. And it's, balancing all of those and, really choosing your moments to shine.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Debbie Hunter, and I am officially an employee of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, although I haven't been there for quite a few months, since January. But I'm returning soon, so I will talk a little bit about what I've done for the 8 years at CMS, and then I'll talk very briefly about what I've been doing for the past year or so. So to begin with, I graduated from Hopkins, the MHS program, in 2003. Loved every moment of it, well, with the exception of a few moments of statistics, which I struggled in terribly. And I became very close friends with a fellow classmate who was working at CMS at the time, which is unusual because she started there in undergrad and was an intern, and it turned into a permanent spot. So she had been there for a couple of years, and she just raved on and on about the agency. And I knew pretty much within the first 6 months of, it was a 2-year program, the MHS program, and I knew pretty soon that I was interested in checking out CMS. So I was fortunate enough to have her connection, and she showed me, just like I have made copies for you, of our organizational chart here. And she asked me to identify for her. Actually, she gave me the 80-something page version of it. I just gave you the very top level, but I can provide you through email or something the other pages. But anyway, She asked me to identify the areas that I thought I would be most interested in her arranging informational interviews. And so I studied it. It took me several days. It's a huge agency. And so she did that, set up around 4 informational interviews, which all of the managers are very happy. They're thrilled to do that, with you all, even if they don't have a staff opening. That was actually within, I think, the first year of my program, so I wasn't ready to start working at that time because, we take, 8 classes at a time. So, but the second year was my field placement, and I started working at CMS, fell in love immediately with the work. I was working in the Center for Medicare. We have, the Medicaid side as well. On day one, I was given tremendous responsibilities. And I was working in the hospital outpatient. It was the hospital ambulatory payment policy group, and specifically the hospital outpatient side. And we were, on day one, I was using my statistics background. And so don't get rid of your books or your notes for those types of classes that you think you're going to need later. I also found very helpful the Intro to Health Policy class and the Research and Evaluation Methods for Health Policy. Those classes were critical for the policy analysis and synthesis class. Anyway, so I was writing options papers. I was presenting, even within the first 3 months, I was presenting to the administrator, actually. They allowed me to do, and not all of the divisions do that. It depends on where you are within the agency, but the regulation that we were working on was brand new. It was the hospital outpatient prospective payment system, and I was on board within the first 6 months of the implementation. So there was a lot of work to be done, and it was a very complex payment system. So anyway, I did that for 4 years. And what we did was we evaluated hospital claims data, and it was a regulatory division. So we developed payment policies. We proposed them, and then we had a comment period. We read public comments, and so you got to know everything you ever wanted to know about hospital sort of access to care for certain, rural hospitals versus urban and suburban hospitals. It was very fascinating. And they came often to your agency and presented, we have this new oncology machine, stereotactic radiosurgery. I think Sinai Hospital is the first one here to offer that. And it's, I think it was $10,000 per radiation, 5-minute radiation. I mean, it was really expensive. And we, they would go to our coverage analysis group and provide the evidence that, it actually is effective and it's better than anything else, for that. And then we would decide, once coverage and analysis decided to cover it, Medicare covered it, we would decide what it should be paid at, what payment level it should be. So anyway, you work with lots of other different components within CMS. I did that for 4 years, and then when the prescription drug benefit passed, I immediately started working on that. That was a pretty chaotic year the first year. A lot of long hours. It was the most fun I'd had, though, and it was super great. And we had 800 at the beginning. We had around 800 Medicare Advantage prescription drug plans apply to contract with us, and around 100 standalone prescription drug plans. And so we were responsible for reviewing the contracts, approving or denying them, overseeing, monitoring, auditing them to make sure, for instance, the formulary classifications were satisfied. The steps there, there was quite a lot of problems. Medicaid stopped paying for dual eligibles. Do you know what I mean by that? Beneficiaries who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare started covering their drugs, and so we had to overnight work very closely with all 50 states, and that was a challenge. Oh my goodness, yeah. And so anyway, it was just fascinating. I did that for 2 years, and I worked with a group of, prior to my MHS, I earned my law degree at the University of Iowa, so I worked in a division of around a dozen attorneys who oversaw that. You didn't necessarily need to be an attorney, but that's usually who they hired for that division. So, we didn't go into a courtroom or anything like that. But then after that, in 2008, I transitioned over to Medicare Enrollment and Appeals Group. And every transition I've made, I keep saying, this is the best I've ever, it really is a fun place to be. And now I work on Medicare Parts A, B, C, and D for enrollment and eligibility, and mostly low-income populations, which is where I really wanted to end up, working in that area, disadvantaged populations. So and I won't go into a whole lot of detail on that, but I was there for 2 years. It was great. I developed a safety net for the prescription drug benefit. If you're not enrolled yet in Medicare, you can come into a pharmacy and get your drugs. The pharmacist doesn't have to turn you away. You can be enrolled at the point of sale, and so that's important to keep people out of the hospital. They get their insulin right away. And then in January, I started a Brookings Fellowship sponsored by CMS, and I was fantasizing that I was going to get to work on health reform the entire time. But, January, they were just about done with it, and I was very enthusiastic in interviewing with Senate Finance and Senate Help, the health, education, pensions, labor and pensions. Anyway, and I realized very quickly after Senate Finance rescheduled my interview 4 times because they had to meet with President Obama in the White House, that I might not land there. But some of the other Brookings Fellows eventually landed there. I was the only one at the time from CMS, a fellow from CMS. So I thought I would be, picked up right away because most of the other fellows were not health related. They were like State Department or something else. But they were so busy. It was incredible to feel the energy of health because I was on the Hill at that time. I just wasn't working directly with the committee at that time, but I was, it was really a fascinating place to be at the time. And I ended up eventually landing in February. I landed on the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, which I knew nothing about Veterans Affairs. And I would say one of the more important pieces of advice to give to you all is be flexible. You never know what doors may close or open, and just go with the flow. Don't try to fight things, And I don't have a military family. I didn't know if I'd have anything to offer to Veterans Affairs. It turned out they were adopting some Medicare payment policies, and so I've helped them with that. I also, my hospital outpatient days, worked on CPT and HCPCS coding. I don't know if you know about that, but diagnostic coding. I've been able to help them with that. I also, for the first time in my life, this was like the highlight of my experience on the committee, and I know I'm talking too long. I'm sorry. But the highlight of my experience was I have been Vietnam veterans a lot of them were exposed to Agent Orange, right? There have been 35 years of, research being conducted on determining the health effects of Agent Orange and what level of exposure some of them may have been. Most of them who may have been harmed were the sprayers of the Agent Orange. Anyway, I knew nothing about any of this before, January. And I suddenly, when they learned that I was from Hopkins with an MHS and I had taken epidemiology and biostatistics and, all these science classes, in undergrad, I had taken, although I was an English major, I sort of took a pre-med track. I had 2 years of organic and 2 years of inorganic and physics and all that. So, microbiology. So, I loved the exposure research, the toxicology and epidemiology work that they had tons of exposure issues, the burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, all sorts of exposure issues that they didn't have anyone on the committee with a science background. I was really shocked at that. And so within the first week, I was given like huge, volumes of Institute of Medicine and NIH of all of these research. Congress commissions the Department of Veterans Affairs to partner with the Institute of Medicine to create these reports on all sorts of research on exposures of various cohorts of veterans, depending on the war. And so I've spent quite a bit of time the past 6 months or so reporting to the staff director on these, the likelihood of these health effects being attributable to these exposures. And I got to plan the most widely attended hearing that we had on September 23rd, just a few weeks ago. And guess who we managed to secure as our witness, who was like our number one witness for the hearing. Dr. Jonathan Samet, any of you remember him? Yeah. And he was my epi professor here, and he's been gone for a couple of years, right? And so some of you may not know him, but anyway, he was like almost like, a god to me. Like he was really amazing. He's one of my favorite professors here. And he actually was the chairman of the committee that reviewed the VA disability presumptions process for the Institute of Medicine. So that's why it was very easy to secure him to testify at the hearing. So anyway, I'll wrap this up. Although I never thought that I would, have any connection or have anything to offer to the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. Wow, I definitely, not only my CMS background was helpful to the committee, but my Hopkins background was, and this is a very strange coincidence, but I worked for the Iowa Department of Public Health back when I was in law school on pesticide exposure, which Agent Orange is a herbicide, but whatever. And so anyway, so you never know. In public health, you constantly run in, you overlap a lot, whether it's VA or CMS or whatever. And so just be open-minded. I'm about to return to CMS, and a lot of my legislative experience on the Hill will be 100% transferable back to my agency, although a lot of my time has been spent on VA-specific issues. The process is still the same. The hearing, how bills are drafted and the committee reports and all that. Anyway, so it's so transitioning from your backpack to your briefcase, I would say learn to let go of ownership of your writing. That's one important thing, because here you have to own what you write independently here. This is going to sound like a terrible thing to say, but within the first week or so I was at CMS, my manager told me that you learn to plagiarize just about when you get to and I don't mean like officially plagiarize, but like what I mean is you don't recreate the real. Once you get to the agency, if you are not sure how to respond, you get correspondence and you're not sure how to respond to it because you're new, you go look in the vast volumes of other correspondence that we've written, and you have to make sure that the law hasn't changed and the regulations and policies haven't changed. But you pick up and you do a little tweaking, and the administrator's name goes on nearly everything. Your name never. Yeah. No. And even at the group level, like even if you write a letter to the state Medicaid directors and you spend, days on it, and it's like a 20-page letter and you're the only one who wrote it, it's going to be reviewed by so many other higher management levels. You really don't want your name. You're talking about, especially at a national, at a federal agency that sets national policy, you really want that protection of working on a team of folks. And anyway, so let go of ownership. And anyway, I'll end here. I have a few other suggestions, but I'll end here. So.
Sure. Well, first, my apologies for being late. My advice would be about your relationships. You mentioned already, Dr. Samet, your professors that you have here, relationship with each other in terms of your study groups. Alumni, I'm so happy that the Career Service and alumni are doing this together. One of the things that's very valuable is the talent that Hopkins brings here and continuing those relationships through our alumni society, through events like this. And I've been very fortunate that each new position that I've gotten is through a mentor. There's a new office and opening the doors for me. So I'm very, actually my director in my office in Health Information Technology and Quality is also a Hopkins alum. And I know we're trying to recruit 2 students who are in the Public Health Informatics program into our office. So also the knowledge and the content knowledge, specifically some of the certificate programs that we have here at Hopkins. I did specifically a certificate program in health disparities under Thomas Leviste. I was then recruited to the HHS Office of Minority Health, where I spent the last 5 years. As I just mentioned, Hopkins is one of the 6 university-based competitive institutions that got the Office of National Coordinator Public Health Informatics program. So again, the relationships here within your student body, the relationship with your professors. You mentioned the IOM specifically. There are many professors here who serve on the different IOM committees. Many of those meetings are audio taped, webcast. You can attend them in person, learn the content. There's special subcommittees. I know you had the Women in Leadership program. Dr. Rose Martinez, who's also a Hopkins alum, is the chair for the Populations Committee, I believe it is. So again, just really, after you finish all your coursework, after your exams, the midterms and all that, very highly important academic work to gain the content knowledge from your classes. During your breaks, during 5:30 evening times, Saturdays, continue those relationships within your study group, even when you finish your program. I'm very happy to maintain the email communications. Whenever I see someone at HHS who's a Hopkins alum, I send it over, to the office to make sure they know that within HHS there's Hopkins alumni leadership. I'm just a very proud alumni, and that would be my advice. As you move from the backpack to the briefcase, is maintaining your relationships and also mentoring. When you graduate, come back and recruit. Maintain relationships just via email, sharing press publications that your office has worked on or you've written for your director, things like that. Just continuing that mentoring relationship and also seeking out others within the university here who can serve as your mentors.
Okay. One question I do have and to ask is, for somebody that has little to no experience of wanting to work in the federal government, what skills or abilities do you think are most important to have or that can be transferable from something you might be doing as a student into any area of the federal government? Go ahead.
Writing. If you can write well, clearly, succinctly, and efficiently, you will be a prized asset. Regardless of, I think, what agency and what subject area you have to work with, ultimately you have to convey your work product in writing to either your supervisor or to the public or, as a regulator, the industries you regulate. So being able to write succinctly and quickly is an asset that I just can't, express more strongly that is well appreciated.
For those of you that aren't linear thinkers, there's a lot of people in the room who are very process-oriented, and they'll do very well in the government because there's a lot of processes. If you remember, for those of you in MPH, we had to do the whole Myers-Briggs thing to the ENTPs in the room. Your ability to sort of look across populations will serve you incredibly well. The whole time they were speaking, I was thinking about how we now have a federal office of dual eligible. So we now have a component CMS dedicated solely to taking care of the people that she talked about. They're working on an FDA, this new FDA Sentinel program, which will replicate Dr. Graham's work via computer and dive deep into sort of these population-based databases. And I've got an HIT person on the left of me, and I'm going, wow, what a lunch we could have if we got together somewhere between White Oak and Rockville and Woodlawn. So the ability to sort of think about what all that stuff looks like will serve you well because they're always building new things. And just today we got the email about HHS Innovates, and they're looking for new opportunities and new ideas. This really is a transformational time in the government where, you've got Todd Park as a chief technology officer for HHS, who's looking at a lot of the technological processes we have and going, we can do better. So your ability to sort of think, succeed within the box, but then think outside the box, I think will serve you very well.
I remember the problem-solving class in terms of working as a team, and I think some people already mentioned the flexibility. Knowing your own skills and your own leadership specific talents and how you can contribute to that team, I think is very helpful. I hope everyone knows about all the different fellowships, the different internship programs. I think I forwarded already the URL. That's a great way to get your foot in the door via internships, fellowships. I myself started in government in '96 through the support of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Edward Roybal Public Health Fellowship. And I know since then there's been at least 3 Hopkins alum who have also done that program to get their foot in the door in the government. So Hopkins is obviously a great institution, a lot of CDC fellowships, Common Recruit. I think you have lots of different informational sessions from CDC and other programs. So fellowships, specific student education employment programs with HHS. But one of the things, of the skills that anyone needs really is what you learn in that problem-solving class, where you learned what you were the expert in, the data analysis, and then integrate, exactly, working in that group. And as you just made that comment, observing everyone's different clique of talent and expertise, but how do we efficiently work that together as a group to do whatever our goal is. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to comment I won't take up long this time. Okay, I would say that absolutely writing. Some of you have heard me speak in other settings, but I'm recognizing some faces. But yeah, I've spoken strongly about the ability to write well and how important that is. And I would say, though, that really starts with your resume and your KSAs. And when we're saying writing well, after I finished law school, I thought, boy, I was an English major too before that. And so I thought, boy, I really know how to write. I got here to Hopkins and I had to learn to write very differently than the way I wrote for law school. When I got to CMS, again, I thought I was a really great writer, but it wasn't the type of writing that they do at CMS. And the way I became better and better and better, and I'm still learning, when I got to the Senate committee, it's very different than the way they write. And it's almost like code. But anyway, very different than the way they write at CMS. So when we say write well, what you may be envisioning, if you're starting out at a new place of employment, the first few weeks, you need to be like a sponge and learn the terminology, learn the language, because unless you've already been exposed somehow to that, and your classes would not have exposed you alone to all of what you need to, just sit back, and most divisions allow you to do that. Just sit back and absorb and ask questions. And especially within the first 6 months, someone is very likely going to be mentoring you, whether they're an official mentor or not. It's typically your supervisor, but not always. Could be a technical advisor. But when they critique your writing, the way in which you respond is really critical to encouraging them to continue to critique your writing. So when they give you something back in track changes or hard copy red markup, tell them, thank you, that, this is really helpful. And that's how I learned to become a better writer, is to, and if they don't critique you, ask them to critique your writing. I mean, you're most likely going to get that anyway at CMS, but don't be insulted by it or anything like that. And as far as other skills, there was one other thing I was going to say really fast. And
question about KSAs.
Oh, yeah.
It's that when you do your USA Jobs application, they ask for your knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
They're moving to a federal resume
They're still doing
process,
that,
but they're still currently doing it.
Yeah.
And perhaps we could touch it as another question on the application.
But your resume, when you're writing, that is your first opportunity to show them how well you write, is your resume and your knowledge, skills, and abilities, your KSAs. And your resume, think of your resume as your translator that follows you everywhere you go. And each employer is a different country. And you use your resume to translate your skills to that employer, because it's really not about you. It's about what you can do for them. And so you have to translate your credentials, your skills into what they need in their, division very specifically. So when there are these handouts in the back, and if you flip, and this doesn't apply just to CMS, this is any employer, do your research and find out. But yeah, the functional statements, I've made a copy of, and those of you who are listening on the web, I can give this to Paul.
The handouts are definitely in the back if you want to look at anything that's there.
So anyway, connect it, blend it into your resume.
Show your hands. Is there anybody here that does have questions? Does anybody want to start with a question? Because I have one more, but also to start to think of, if you have ones, please raise your hand. Go ahead. Maybe they'll find out more tomorrow.
I'll say it depends. And the reason I'll say it depends is I was pretty deeply steeped in this in health policy and management. I actually studied, bureaucracy and implementation and all that stuff. And I'm amazed at the ability to sit and, I'll get fired for saying this if they listen to the web, but, you're listening to the administrator, right, and the secretary giving these speeches from the front of the room about how they're going to transform the agency. And you've got senior leaders who are saying, I've heard this before. Right? And there is a real tension between people who have been there and served, multiple presidents and multiple administrators and multiple secretaries. And when you look at the pictures outside of my office and the office of the administrator, you see, I don't know that there's been an administrator there longer than 2 years before. So you're thinking in the back of your mind, there's a lot of political transition here, but at the same time, the rules that you've worked on have their genesis in laws that were written, decades ago, and they're still in play. There are people who actually have binders that say HCFA, right, the former name of CMS, and yet the work that they're doing today is still current. So I'd probably say in HHS more than anywhere, you see a real mix of politicals, right, because this is a very political time for Health and Human Services, and the White House Office of Health Reform is very active in guiding the work that we're doing. And at the same time, you have an in-place bureaucracy that continues to do the important work that it does in improving America's health.
I was just going to say, you really kind of leave that behind in your individual. It does ultimately impact what you work on every day, absolutely. But none of us are political appointees, so you really have to be nonpartisan. You really, really do need to leave that that's hard. I know. Well, anyway, so we're all, whether you're Republican or Democrat or Independent, we're all trying to improve the system. Some of you may argue that but we really, all of us really are. And so you do the best that you can to implement, the laws and for the Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries, to ensure, our mission. I should have brought our mission statement. I'm kind of stumbling over it, but I'm trying to think, quality care, in an efficient way to our beneficiaries. So it really doesn't impact the way in which you do your work. It obviously impacts what your work is. But
One of the classes that I remembered I really enjoyed was with Vicente Navarro, the politics and public health. So if you haven't taken that class yet, I think it's offered in the spring. It's a wonderful class. He's a great professor. I started in '96 at HHS under the Clinton administration, and so I saw that a change. And as a staff person, and a very junior staff person, it was frustrating because there were things that we were planning and we couldn't proceed until we had the new appointees. So, and some things changed because some thought was regarding our initiatives being more of a, Dr. David Satcher before the Clinton administration. So that is frustrating as a staff person when you're working on projects. You've had these, public meetings, you've got an input, and you've got a large community supporting what you're working on outside of HHS. And you just have to, the way I've seen it, is be respectful. There's new leadership coming on. How do you then be supportive and help them also understand what's already occurred in the department, perhaps what's already worked in the department? But we all know everyone has different human behavior, and some people want to start fresh from a different perspective. And although it's worked well in the past, they may not wish to implement it the same way, and it's their prerogative. It's their opportunity to do something new or to build on something and improve something, perhaps, if it hasn't worked in the past. So as a staff person, I've seen things that we've planned for get put on the side burner, and our office perhaps not get as much of attention, or our office get moved further away from the Humphrey building. I started the Humphrey building for 8 years. I work in Rockville now, and I love my new office. But geography is also indication of top priority within the senior leadership too.
I think it's not too dissimilar, though, to sometimes if you work in the private industry and there's a new strategic vision, then, the organization has to realign to the new vision. So, even though the political process is, it's always on the front page and is very cyclical, as a staff member, you have to just, like you said, align to the new vision. And, depending on the agency and depending on, where you're at in the federal government, you're could be affected more or less by it. It really depends on, I guess, how close you also are to a political appointee. The more close that your work is affected by a political appointee, the more influence the political process, the change in the political system will have on your job. But, my day-to-day job, it wouldn't be affected in the near term, at least, of what I would do. It would take, legislative changes to affect how I would do my job.
I just actually thought of one thing really quickly to give you a concrete example for the prescription drug benefit. Because of the political back and forth, we had to have, I think it was like 3 different or 4 different versions of, because we had to implement it, it felt like overnight. We had around 7 or 8 months or so, which is pretty much overnight for that kind of legislation. And we didn't know exactly what the final version would look like. So it did impact what we did and how we did it in that example, because we had to be right ready to implement any one of the 5 versions or however many versions it was. And it was pretty overwhelming, but yeah. So.
In that. Can you speak up just a little bit?
I think it really depends on the agency and your position. If in my division and really in a lot of the FDA, almost everyone has some form of a doctoral degree, who's a sort of either a medical officer or some type of scientific reviewer. I'll be coming back down on the 16th to actually recruit, PhD level epidemiologists and scientists for our office. So, it really depends, I think, on the position and what type of technical qualifications are needed for that position.
I think it makes a big difference. I don't have a doctoral degree, and I was actually talking to a very senior person who was acting in a certain office, and she was telling me she's got her master's RN. She's been in the government, 25 years. has been acting director of this office, and she was sharing with me how the fact that she doesn't have a doctoral degree really impacts her in terms of some of the when she's filling out the application, and that she knew other candidates who were being considered who are MDs or PhDs. So to me, I'm a strong believer in education. You know, that's why I chose to come to Hopkins, because I feel we get the best training here. And I think if someone perhaps has a choice, they may more likely choose a doctoral candidate. I'm just sharing a little bit of an experience from someone who has lots of government experience, is acting director of an office, is an RN, has a master's in nursing, but just doesn't have a doctoral degree. And she shared with me her personal, just acknowledgement that there are other candidates who have many years experience, but have the additional degree.
And I sometimes will take my credentials off my last name when I'm sending emails to people from my email signature, because I'm really close to the politicals. And by and large, sometimes people look at academic credentialing and sort of high-level thinking, and it's intuitive for us when we're talking to someone to quote an article, right? Well, as Cutler and Berwick said in 2007 Health Affairs, right? And people are like, what? I asked you a question. I didn't, ask you to do research for me. So it's really a balance of figuring out when it is that you're going to put that stuff in play. I would love to go to the London School of Economics and get a PhD comparing what the conservatives in the UK are doing to UK's NICE versus what we're doing to CMS and the US healthcare system as sort of the ultimate comparative health policy and politics thesis. And if I came back with that thesis in hand in 4 years, I don't think it would make a hill of beans worth of difference to the people I'm working with. In fact, they'd probably be more impressed if I worked with them over the next 4 years to actually work on what we're doing here and share with them what I'm reading from abroad, as opposed to actually earning some academic credential. So there are people that do respect academic credentials. They do matter if you have them. No one really, will judge you too harshly unless you wave it in their face, I think is sort of my thought.
In most of the components I've worked with in CMS, very few people have a PhD. Lots of folks have a PharmD or an MD or a JD. But within other components of CMS, like OSORA, is it still called OSORA now after health reform?
Well, we changed it, but we refused to pronounce it differently.
It's our research component in operations. So anyway, there are definitely components within CMS. I know folks who work there that wouldn't have gotten their jobs there if they had not had their PhDs. Now, what their PhDs are in, I can't remember exactly, but if it's in something that's not at all related to domestic, I'm not sure. I think it might need to be related to domestic health, but maybe not. I don't know. But a PhD is definitely helpful for certain positions within our agency. I can't speak for other area. I don't know, but for other employers like the FDA.
I do have a question, and I think this is general a question to ask a law student. So, to me, there's a lot of guides, manuals, rumors, myths, if you want to say, about how to apply to the federal government. And so I'm just curious to hear from your experience is what are the best ways to get your foot in the door to the federal government, and also to USA Jobs? Yes or no? Should you go there to look for jobs, for USA Jobs?
The answer to your first question is to talk to one of us. And we'll offer to stay in touch with you, and if you don't, you're silly for not. And it's great to see Philippa laugh. I'm such a fan of it. You have re-engineered this and re-energized this whole component, so it's great to see you. But literally, I got an email the other day that said this is how our direct hire authority is going to work in this new fiscal year. We are going to fund positions that correspond to these sections of the Affordable Care Act. These are the components that are hiring. These are the numbers of slots that they're hiring, and these are the people they're going to be hiring. So the ability for me to literally walk over to the director of the new Center for Medicare, Medicaid Innovation and say, here's someone that I think would be a good fit for something, right? If you're a good person, they're interested and they're going to figure that out. Now, the USA Jobs process, however, though, is essential because oftentimes they can't hire you if you don't come off of a best qualified list. And what I will say is I got my job by asking someone that I'd worked with who was at HHS to review my answers to the USA Jobs questions, to apply for everything, right? On April 9th, they put out that we're hiring for everything. And I applied to everything. And the advice that I got was, literally, I got like 4 calls. And it was like, are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? And it was, do I want to be in the Medicare plan payment group, doing risk adjustment payment policy, working for Rockstar PhDs, which would have been awesome? Or do I want to be in Washington, sort of close to the action and the policy? And you sort of got to, or the politics, you sort of got to decide what's the best fit for you. So the USA Jobs process qualifies you. But again, I'd really work with someone who knows the process so they can tell you, don't regurgitate your resume every time they ask this question. The way you said, tell them exactly how what you do fits what they're looking for. So it's so more my experience than my thought, because that's what worked for me.
I'll say overall, the one thing I hope you're getting from all these different answers is that, there's no right or wrong answer. The government is very heterogeneous, even within one agency, how you go about to get a job, and also just the office mores are very heterogeneous. So, at the FDA, our KSAs are not essay based. It's all sort of multiple choice questions. And so if you do a application which have multiple choice question qualifications, my advice is, first, always be truthful, but, do not be bashful. If you think if a descriptor can fit you and you can justify it, choose the highest level, the best descriptor possible. For example, for a recent promotion, we need to be judged as national level experts. Coming from Hopkins, I wouldn't consider myself a national level expert, but, in the rubrics that, HR qualifies people for, this position, technically, I was a national level expert. So you have to sort of sometimes also, ask people, well, what does this mean by a national level expert? How does that justified? And, this is just, sample of one of my experience from USA Jobs, is that my USA Job resume is like 5 pages long. It's gargantuan. But I have a standard 1-page resume which I forward to people saying, here's my qualifications, here's my experiences. But on USA Jobs, my resume, is extremely detail oriented. It spells everything out. And especially because I was applying for technical positions, every single type of analysis I can do, every single little type of study I could have done, every keyword that was in the job description was in my resume. Because regardless of whether you have a resume pass and the center director thinks you're an amazing candidate, if you're not on the best qualified list, there's nothing that can be done. And we've had that happen to postdocs from Harvard that we think would be amazing candidates, but for some reason that we actually don't know why, they weren't on the best qualified list, and we had no control over it. So sometimes it is a big black box, and I would err on the side of putting more detail than less, especially if using USA Jobs to get qualified and you actually got the interview through a resume pass.
Okay, I would say that for each and every vacancy that you apply for, you really need to have a slightly tweaked resume, a different resume for each one. And unless you're applying for multiple positions within the same group or something. But if it's within different, especially different employers, federal employers like FDA versus CMS, and the reason I say that is, again, getting back to the functional statements, which I've sort of referenced. It's, if you don't know what I'm talking about, come speak with me about it. But you really need to see if any of your skills match up with the functional statements or the description of whatever the employer says that they need you to do, or not that you, whatever their mission and vision is, and if they provide details like CMS does for each division level, then and don't stretch it, but like connect it for them. Translate your skills into concrete examples of what you can do for them. Quantify, give them, and if you don't have a lot of work experience yet, if you went straight from undergrad, to grad school, then no, you probably wouldn't have a different resume for each. You might not. But if you have quite a bit, 4 or 5 years of work experience already, you do want to. You don't want to just slam everything into your resume. You want to put into your resume only the relevant stuff, and the KSAs right now, the way in which I believe most of them on USA Jobs are working, or the way in which they appear on the web, is this little box pops up, and it looks like maybe room for about 5 sentences. That's not what, it's 8,000 characters.
Depending on the question, right?
They really do, if you've got, some decent work experience, they really do expect you to satisfy close to that 8,000 character, which is around a page worth of writing. And again, you don't need to regurgitate your resume. It needs to be very specific examples of what you've done in your past. It can be volunteer work, even in Africa or wherever, that would connect to the functional statements.
I remember a few years ago doing a talk specific about writing the KSAs, and this is where your writing skills, your efficiency with words, and your accuracy is so key. Being very explicit in what your role is and what the outcome of what you did matches to what skills, what abilities they're looking for. So I think you definitely have to write a different response to each of the questions that they ask for you. And I would also, I'll plug it again, HHS offers lots of different student internship and fellowship opportunities. Hope you know about the HHS Emerging Leaders Program. At HRSA, we have the HRSA Scholars Program. And what these training opportunities allow is for a cohort of individuals to come in, maybe 20, 25, and allows for actually quite an opportunity to do professional development, that you get funding to do outside trainings, and you come in at a grade level 9. Everyone who has a master's comes in at a level 9, and then your second year you jump up to an 11. When you complete the 2-year program, you get confirmed as a 12. So in terms of your advancement in government, it can be quite quickly. But what I feel is important is that you're in a cohort of other individuals who are learning. And I actually know a couple of PhD doctoral graduates who started in one of the leadership programs. It wasn't the salary they were looking for because they had a PhD, but it was their foot in the door. And I think that's what I did. I got a fellowship. I started in '96. I got my foot in the door, and through different mentoring opportunities that I've met different leaders, I get details to different offices. And, I had a great detail to a new office of adolescent health. I learned a great deal. I thought I was going to stay permanently, but it didn't work out that way. So they actually chose someone with a PhD from another school nearby, University of Maryland. But just being flexible. But the internships, the fellowships, and of course, you just mentioned direct hire. We are under a great opportunity under this administration for direct hire. I know at HRSA in my orientation class in September, there were about 80 individuals in that orientation class. It was the largest orientation class that they had seen in personnel. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention that I mentioned before when I talked is individuals who are looking at your responses are not content, pharmacy, physicians, expertise. They're looking at keywords. These are human resources, very dedicated individuals, but they're not public health masters, Hopkins alumnus. So they're looking for keywords to match it. So that's where your efficiency in words, what your role is, and what your outcome because of what you did matches to those knowledge, skills, and abilities is what they're looking to pick up. And I don't know if they still do this, but I remember they used to score them. So they still do that. So they score them, and so those that. Then depending on the office who submitted the application, they may wish only to see the top applicant. They may wish to see the top 3, top 10. It's up to that office. But but take your time, and usually they usually give you about, I think, a month, but I know some positions are advertised less than 2 weeks, and just, sometimes positions are written for certain people. So
if it's less than a week.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to pick up on that because that's also where there's a lot of variability. So when I came into the government, I was told that if you went on USA Jobs and you saw it was open for 2 weeks, forget about it. It had an internal candidate. This was just for policy. In CEDAR, that's not the case. For CEDAR, we need so many people. They're closing it in 2 weeks just so they can get the applicants through the HR process. So sometimes a short cutoff could also mean they just need people in fast, and they might reopen it again. So don't let that discourage you from trying to apply. And which also relates to, I was not hired under direct authority, so I can just through the regular HR process, you need to be patient. Even if the center director or office director tells you, I want to hire you, it may take 3 to 6 months before you get the official response from HR, which, especially as you're graduating, you're biting your nails saying, I need a job that starts in July. And I did not get my official HR letter until, I interviewed in January. They called my references in February. I did not get my official offer letter until end of May. So depending on the way you're being hired into the system, sometimes you need to be patient. But it can be worth it because it really is some amazing opportunities.
That was not my experience. So don't freak out over what he just said. I know that can happen, but I started within about 2 or 3 weeks. Wow. So yeah, it was very quickly. And a lot of the students that I've brought on board to the agency over the past 8 years have come on board pretty quickly. It could be an FDA, I don't know, but.
More questions?
Here we go.
More questions?
It's inevitable.
Just raise your hand up. Right here, sorry.
So in that regards, then, when is a good time to apply? Because if you still have, right now it's November, and if you're not graduating until May, you start applying now, and then they're like, oh, well, we need to start in 4 weeks. And they're like, well, actually, I don't have my degree yet.
That's where networking comes in.
Yeah.
So if you talk to me and you have a PhD in epidemiology, I would say, hand me your resume now, and that's no problem. It depends. It really depends also on when they need someone in that position. So, you really sort of need to network and sort of figure out, when do they need someone to start date, and or can they wait for you?
There's a real advantage here to this, and I think we've all sort of touched on it, some even more loudly than others, is the relationship with the alumni network. I want to thank Renaud for already sending me a LinkedIn invite while I'm on the panel. That's the type of passion I'm interested in. But it's like literally yesterday, Chad Bolt is working on his laptop in our office with a visitor's badge on. And he's sort of in between the fellowship he was doing on sabbatical here and the new role he's going to be brought in at. Being affiliated with this institution really, really helps. And in the time between now and graduation, the ability to figure out what agency might be a best fit for you, or whether or not you'd be happier at the Department of State as a health person in another country as opposed to being at HHS in international health. You have access to people who know people who can answer those questions for you. So while the USA Jobs and the hiring process, those are all great conversations, I'd really encourage you to sort of start with a very broad funnel and say what opportunities might be right for me, because they won't be listed that way on USA Jobs. It won't say International Health Rockstar. It'll say medical officer.
Another question?
What courses or skill sets that you learned here have you found the most helpful?
Everything.
Next question.
So I'll say one thing though is, so obviously, I'm a psychiatric epidemiologist. My specialty is in Parkinson's disease, so I have a very narrow focus, obviously, because I'm a PhD. However, in my role, I've had to really brush up on everything I learned about the Framingham study in my first year, about cardiovascular risk, about, psoriasis. So I guess it's not this course I learned other than for me the technical skills, but the ability to, research quickly and get myself up to speed on a topic very quickly and know where to look and know also who to contact to get me up to speed fast.
All right, I'm going to go lightning round of questions. So, anybody else have a question? Great.
Extremely relevant. Just depends on what office or division in the FDA you are. I mean, I'm a sort of a regulator reviewer, so I would be involved with setting guidances, which are based on our policies and regulations, and telling industry how to interpret and how to interact with us. But sort of policy, that's a whole separate office which interacts with Congress and the White House to develop policy.
No one's going to ask you the steps of the Eightfold Path, right? And no one's going to ask you to explain sort of Kingdon's trash cans and windows of opportunity. But you're sitting back and you're going, okay, I'm in a cab on the way here and I'm hearing an ad about Medicare's new fraud-fighting tools. I'm seeing that we've reorganized our Medicare and Medicaid integrity groups into a new Center for Program Integrity. My understanding the policy process and the bureaucracy from the classes that I've taken, combined with work in health policy analysis and synthesis and Chris Forrest's insistence in U.S. healthcare that everything that we write be 5 pages with 1-inch margins, double spaced, right, gives me a skill set to sort of see over the horizon, figure out where the puck is going, figure out how to align myself there, and then learn how to communicate tersely enough to be able to be there when it gets there at the time that I want to be there. So again, all of your classes and all of your skill sets and conversations matter, but no one's ever going to ask you anything that sounds like anything that you saw in a textbook or on an exam.
Except for statistics.
Which I abhor.
Any other question? Go ahead, lady.
So how's the pay?
I'll say this: it's all very public.
Yeah. I'll tell you exactly. I started out in 2003, and I had a JD, lots of school loans from my law school. Oh my goodness. And then Hopkins on top of that. And, I started out at 38,000 GS9, but that was way back. Now the GS9 is higher. What is it now? Like 50 or something like that. Anyway, you can look it up. You can Google it right now with your blog. Yeah. Anyway, but, back then, I think it's a little different now, but back then the Hopkins group, this was, I think, unique to the Hopkins group, within 3 months jumped up to the GS11. And then within 1 year, I jumped up to a GS12, and then the 13 you compete for, you apply for. I climbed rapidly. So it was painful, very painful for a few months, but it got better. And it was totally worth it. It is a privilege to work for the federal government, especially in the healthcare agency, Medicare, Medicaid, or the FDA or any of the HHS. Yeah. And it was often I came in through the SCEP program. There's like the STEP and the SCEP, and then there's the FM or the management. What is it called? I don't know all these.
I was going to say my biggest regret is not doing a PMI back then, or PMF now as Presidential Management Fellowship. Mm-hmm. Within 6 months of graduating, you're eligible for this fellowship. Once you're outside of 6 months after graduation, that window closes.
Yeah.
And actually, if anyone wants to talk about it, I got a placement, but I declined it for my job at the FDA, so I can talk about the process and what I called federal speed dating.
Actually, I'm going to go ahead. We're getting to the end of our time, so I would like to say, if you still do have questions, please do come up and ask our panelists. I would like to thank our panelists all for coming tonight. We really do appreciate your time. We do have a little token of our appreciation. So
Great.
I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming as well. If you did not sign in, please do sign in.
Bloomberg School of Public Health alumni.
Thank you again.
This is awesome. Thank you.